We don't have to do the little spring.
Hello, everybody. Everybody having a good 20 books? That's great. I'd like to welcome you here to our panel on science fiction. Science fiction is the fourth largest genre within fiction. And if you want to have a reason, if you have a question on why, all you have to look at are these four writers to my right. These are the reasons that science fiction does so well. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with a quick introduction, and I'll start on the far end with David.
I'm David Weber.
Your mic is not working.
Can you hear me now? Okay, he doesn't work for Alltel anymore. I'm David Weber. I sold my first novel in 1989. I've sold a few since then. I write the Honor Harrington series. I do the Safehold series with Tor. And I guess I would definitely be classified as military science fiction, although I would argue that some of my stuff branches beyond that genre.
Joshua Dalzelle. I've been published since 2013. Most notable for the Megaforce series and Black Fleet Saga. One's pure military science fiction, the other one kind of straddles the line between space opera and military science fiction.
I'm Brandon Q. Morris from Germany in this case. I'm writing science fiction since 2016, and as I'm a physicist by education, I'm writing hard science fiction. That means a scientifically plausible one.
Does it work? It works. Hi, I'm Todd McCaffrey. The first thing you'll know me for is being the son of Anne McCaffrey and writing in the Dragon Riders of Pern series. I have my own space opera series out, The Canaris Rift. Just finished a middle grade series, the LA Witch series. Have busted out a new pen name and all sorts of other stuff. I got over 3 million words in print.
And my name is Jonathan Brazee. I'm a retired Marine colonel. Now I'm a full-time hybrid writer of mostly military science fiction, but I have some other types of science fiction. I live in Colorado Springs with my wife Kiwi and twin 4-year-old girls, Danika, Dawn, and Darika Marie. And while most of you probably come to a conference like this and don't get enough sleep, I come to get a full night's sleep.
Try it with 3, the same age.
I was kind of a precocious reader when I was a child, reading adult books in first grade. And then when I read Starman's Son by Andre Norton, I was just gobsmacked by the fact that you could actually create your own universe and write a story in it. And that's what brought me to science fiction. So I'd like to turn that question to our panelists. And I'll start with Todd on why do you write sci-fi? Why do you choose that? What brought you to the genre?
Well, the expected answer would be, well, my mother wrote it. Actually, I didn't know she was writing science fiction at the time. I came across Space Cat by Ruthven Todd when I was like 6, 7, 8, something like that. So I fell into science fiction from there, and then I fell into Heinlein. And of course, the original Star Trek series was a huge influence on anybody who grew up during that age. But I was sort of always telling stories, and science fiction was one of the 2 places I liked playing. I also do fantasy.
Yeah, I grew up in the East, behind the Iron Curtain, so I grew up with quite a lot of different sci-fi stories, but it was still very strange worlds that I was interested in, and so, yeah, and if we wanted to watch things like Star Trek, we had to do some illegal things, open the TV to Western channels. It was also quite interesting to do that.
There we go. All right, that's less awkward. I started younger with film, Star Wars, things like Fly the Navigator, things like that. I had a high school teacher who was really into Heinlein and Asimov and got us reading the classics, and I really kind of dug into that. And then I joined the military, and I got into mass market paperbacks. So I'm reading David Weber and Timothy Zahn. And so when I started writing, that was just a natural, that was what I loved. And so I think a lot of us tend to want to start with the thing we love most, and that's where we got to go from there.
I actually intended to teach history and write on the side. My introduction to science fiction, I had a broken arm. I was about 10 years old. I'd read all the Black Stallion novels. I'd read all the You Were There at Gettysburg, you know, all that stuff. I'd read Swallows and Amazons. I was out of stuff. So I went to my dad's bookshelf, and I got Jack Williamson's Legion of Space, 1939, which was closer to present than it would be today, and read it. And that was really good stuff. So the next one was Genus Homo by Sprague de Camp and P. Schuler Mitchell, which, in my opinion, is the true source material for all the Planet of the Apes movies, if you get down to it. And then my good-for-nothing blue-collar dad from Chicago had the entire Fantasy Press hardcover of E. Doc Smith, all of them autographed by the author. And the autograph for Children of the Lens covered a page and a half because my dad was at the same bookstore in Chicago every time the book came out. So I got my love of science fiction early. And I had the storyteller bug. And it was either that or historical fiction when I started writing. And I tried the science fiction first, which means that I have a complete historical novel series that will never see the light of day, carefully plotted out. But that's how I fell into my present evil company.
John W. Campbell once wrote that science fiction exists between time exists between the laboratory and the marketplace. That is, it's between the time when something is possible and when it has become applied to everyday life. So with that in mind, to what extent can science fiction affect or improve the development in science and technology in human life? Is it right to say that science fiction can change what humanity looks like in the future? And tying into that, when you're writing, how much do you try to predict the future within your stories? And we'll start now with Brandon.
Yeah, I think only humans can change how the future will look for us humans. But as a science fiction writer, I can, on one hand, describe a future I would think is great, and on the other hand, I can describe a future where I think it's dystopian, and I would never like to live in that future. So maybe the reader can decide for himself which one is the better one. So that's what I can do, I think.
Just more on the practical side, I think that humans, we tend to, somebody imagines something and then somebody likes that and then they try to make it happen. Cell phones were famously Star Trek communicators. That's how that came about. Modern submarines, Jules Verne. There's tons of examples of how everything we see around us has been driven at one time by science fiction. And so, if you're writing something that, near future or something that you want to see come past, you might inspire an engineer, a research scientist, or somebody that's going to try to see this and it's going to be in their mind, and they're going to try to force this into reality.
I think, and I've said, you don't have to listen. You've heard this so many times before. Science fiction is the fairy tales of a technic society. Okay, they're cautionary tales, they're inspirational tales, they're interpretive tales. We don't have elves and trolls and wizards. We have cyborgs and artificial intelligence and scientists. But we're doing the same thing that storytellers have always done for the society around them, which is to inspire, to warn, and to entertain, not necessarily in that order. I am more focused on the human side of the science fiction I write, really, even though my stuff is really hardware heavy. I'm more interested in the human interactions and how they're going to respond to the situations that I create for them. And I hope my science fiction, if it's going to have an inspirational effect, I hope that it's not institutional, but on the personal level. That it's not hardware, that it's the software that operates the hardware that may take something from what I'm writing on an individual level and combine it into something hopefully a little bit better than what we've had, okay? And I will say this, I think that all science fiction, even dystopian science fiction, is fundamentally optimistic, because it assumes there'll be a future to be bad. I'm just saying.
And the cool science fiction does two things as time goes on. It either becomes fact or it becomes fantasy. I love the fact that Alcubierre and is it Dalton? They're we talk about Starship Enterprise and Space Warp. Well, somebody's actually figured out how to do it within the realm of physics. All it requires right now, at least in the Alcubierre drive, is negative energy equivalent to the conversion of the entire mass of Jupiter. Just a small technical problem. And I understand the Dalton drive is actually similar, but a little bit more efficient. But that's kind of what happens with science fiction, that we look at possibilities. There have been some tropes in science fiction for forever. Colonization of other planets, faster than light travel. There's some that got added because somebody in Star Trek didn't want to spend time in the space shuttle going back down to the planet, so we got teleportation. But, hey, we're happy with that. We have automatic doors. We have cell phones, communicators. And yeah, we get to go play with all the cool stuff. And what about you, Mr. Moderator? Come on, tell us about you.
I wasn't supposed to answer.
Says
No,
who?
no. I believe that the ideas, and I've talked to a lot of scientists at Dartmouth and places like that, and a lot of the ideas were either formulated or something similar to that in something that they read in science fiction. And then they started wondering, wow, can we really do that? Or wouldn't that be cool if we did that? And you can see the lineage of some of these developments that are coming down the line, and that have already come down the line. And I believe in the future that will continue to happen. So I think definitely science fiction maybe cannot do the actual development, but they can be a harbinger of what will be happening, and they can be the germ of an idea that that will eventually create something that's going to end up affecting our daily lives. I'm going to go a little bit less weighty right now. What I'm going to do is ask, we're going to start with Joshua, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you since you've become a writer, dealing with writing?
It's kind of hard to answer because I started this with it firmly in mind. This was always going to be a hobby. It was a hobby when I was a kid, as a teenager, and then when I found out you could independently publish, I was great. This is going to be a hobby that I make a little bit of money for, and it'd be great. So just becoming a full-time author, I started in 2014. I quit my engineering job. That was it was a huge leap for me. It was now you're flying without a net. It was scary, and so since then, and having the faith in that, I get to do things like go to the Dragon Award and get beat by David Weber. I get to come here and speak to you guys about science fiction next to David Weber, and and I'm saying that not even jokingly. It's the guys that I looked up to now. I get to spend time with and talk to and learn even more from them on a one-on-one basis. And if you go back to myself as a 20-year-old in the dorms, the barracks, and say this will be what you'd be doing as an adult, you wouldn't believe it.
Over the course of 34 years, there are quite a few weird things that happen to you that are memorable. One of the most memorable things that ever happened to me was shortly after Path of the Fury had come out. I was at a convention with Roger Zelazny, and Roger and I are sitting at the same table because Z and W for signings. I had signed all of my books in the state of Virginia. There was a brief hiatus in his signing, and he looked at me and he said, I read Path of the Fury last night, finished it last night. I was like, oh my God, he read my book, oh my God, And he said, I think it may be the best blend of fantasy and hard science I have ever read. And I was like, okay, where do you go from there, But yeah, there have been so many times people that we've met, fans, I think the only other compliment that meant more to me or as much to me as that one did was the guy at EasterCon at the Coffee Clutch who came up to me, didn't say too much, but he came up to me after it was over, and he said, I wanted to thank you for the Grayson Armsman. And I said, "You're welcome." He said, "I think you may be the only person writing science fiction who gets the relationship between the detail and the protectee correct." And I said, "Well, thank you." And then he handed me his card. He was with Buckingham Palace Security.
Wow.
Okay. And so I said, "Okay, I'll take that as a win."
I guess I'll stick in right here.
Go ahead.
I was at Worldcon in Helsinki, and I was in the green room waiting, and old Game of Thrones was there, along with his HBO handler, and we had a conversation for about an hour, and he had to go over and sign autographs. As you can imagine, there were probably 2,000 people in line at his table, so his handler had to go use the restroom, and we were standing there waiting for her to come out. And there was a guy at the far end of this hallway. This hallway is about as long as this room, and he had a book in his hand, and he's coming up with a determined look on his face. And I'm thinking, "Come on, guy, don't bother George now. He's going to get in line. He'll sign your book. Just go in line and wait." And he comes running up there, and it's my book. And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh!" And I look at George, and the problem is this would be a much better tale. But I thought in my mind of looking at him, I was looking right at him, and I was thinking, "Don't worry, George, if you keep on writing, they'll come for you too." But I didn't say it. Todd?
Yeah, for me personally, I hope the craziest thing is yet to happen. When I was a young boy, a small boy, I always wanted to become an astronaut. And at this time in the 1970s, that involved going to the military and becoming very strong and test pilot and whatever. And I was just not the type to do that. So, but nowadays, after I started writing science fiction and it works quite successfully, I hope I can one day afford a private ticket to space and still become an astronaut. It might take 10 or 15 years, but well, you can fly to space with 80 or 85 too. So it is something that might happen, even though I never thought it would be.
So I'm going to tell a story that happened before I became a published writer. And you may have heard me say that Anne McCaffrey is my mom. So I did a year of college here in the States, which was a serious mistake, but I recovered. And partly to pay off all the student and whatever, I got an hourly job as a security guy at the local RGM on campus, and I had to check badges and all. And I was going to be seeing Mom for EasterCon, or for BossCon rather. And so I was rereading Dragon Quest, which I adore, and I found a couple of typos in it, which happens. And somebody comes on in, sees me reading, I check his badge. He said, "What are you reading?" I said, "Oh, it's Dragon Quest by Anne McCaffrey." He said, "Oh, yeah. What do you think of it?" I said, "Well, it's not bad, but there's a couple of typos there." She said, "Well, maybe you should tell the author." And I said, "Yeah, I will. I'm seeing her next weekend. She's my mother." And he looks at me for like 5 seconds and goes, "I find that hard to believe." That's great.
Okay, we're going to go with David on this one. How do you manage your reader expectations regarding the next book?
If only we had George Martin here to ask that question.
I actually don't think about that much. I think about the story. And the story's going to go where the story's going to go. And if the readers respond strongly to it, that's great, and it will help me continue to put the children through college. But if you start writing to your reader's expectation, you stop writing the best story that you can write. Yes, now, the most asinine thing that Harlan Ellison ever said to me was that the listening to your readers destroys the work. Harlan said a great many asinine things. That was just the most asinine thing that he said to me. You listen to your readers because your readers are who you're telling the story for. You don't let your readers take the wheel, but you solicit your readers' input because that's how you know whether or not you're hitting the targets you meant to hit in the story that you're telling. The story has to be yours, the voice has to be yours, but you have to listen to your readers. and I could not conceive how anybody could see that otherwise. But that's where my interface with the readers comes in, is after I've done the book, after they've seen it, after they've had a chance to react to it. And I don't try to solicit a particular response from them when I'm writing the actual story.
That absolutely outstanding answer. The way I retroactively manage expectation. So if I know I'm going to write something and it's what's in my head, it's what I want the story to go, it's the direction I like, I go ahead and I do it, knowing that probably either they're not going to understand it because they're not to the part yet that will make sense, or it's just going to anger them. You know, put an afterword in and give a little bit of your thought process of why you thought that needed to be in there. But yeah, I don't solicit readers and let them dictate how the story goes, because your readers are going to be a huge swath. I mean, different nationalities, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different education levels, and so you're going to find yourself chasing your tail, listening to the loudest group all the time, and it can really hurt your story and where you want to go. And pretty soon you find out you're becoming a literary jukebox. You're just writing what they tell you to write, and you find yourself out in no man's land that way.
Yeah, I can only understand that. The only thing what I let my readers actually do is select names for some protagonists. If they fit, then they fit. If they don't, then it's my choice if I use them. Otherwise, I'm writing the stories basically for myself. I don't plot. I'm a pantser, so I'm writing a story that I want to live in. So, and I hope my readers like that story too. But I cannot ask them before the story is finished. And if they like it, then it's great. If they don't, I cannot do anything about this. It's just the story that was the best for me.
Yeah, I think that in my experience, a book is a transformation. Not only do the characters change, but the reader also changes. And the author changes most of all. So I couldn't, I've had people, I've got fan comments coming in, there should be a red dragon on Pern, and I'll take 50%. And it's like, sorry, that's not how it works. It's the story that involves me, that's gotten me revving up and being willing to go knock out 80, 90,000 words on it. I love it. I've had a couple fans just recently make my day by coming up and saying, oh my gosh, LA is excellent. And it's like, oh, wow, I love hearing that. That's cool. I did something, it worked. But I can't ask ahead of time because no, I'm not going to write that way.
I'm going to take a slightly different tact. I do write for the reader. They're the ones who are downloading the book. They're the ones buying the paperback. They're the ones who hopefully are enjoying it. But over the course of an arc, I do think I'm managing somewhat the reader's expectations by feeding in little things during book 2 and book 3 and book 7 and book 9 that I don't want to say justifies the ending, but kind of sets the stage. And they tend to be very little things to the things that I hope it's when they read the last book, they go, oh yeah, okay, I understand that now, because back in book 3, this happened or that happened. So I'm going to go where the book needs to go, but I want the reader to be satisfied, and I don't want, while the surprise at the end, even if it is a surprise at the end, once they've read it, in my opinion, they should say, yeah, that fits, that's right. So I do think about managing the reader's expectations somewhat.
Jonathan, I absolutely agree with everything you just said. I think the difference is that I don't think of that as managing the reader's expectations the way as I think of it as managing the story direction and the revelation
okay,
to
I'll
the
buy
reader.
that.
So if that's the question that you were asking about, do I write knowing that nobody ever accused me of hiding anything in there and having a hook or a surprise, But no, in that respect, yes, I definitely do think about how the reader is going to respond when the mask comes off the character or whatever. That's a different question from the one I thought we were talking about. That's all I wanted to say.
Sounds good to me. A little bit on the actual work of writing a book, and we'll go with Todd on this one, go down the line. What's your daily routine when you're writing? How do you write a book?
It changes over time. What I do nowadays is I get up, I get out, I go to Starbucks, I get some stuff, I set up, I got my noise-canceling headphones on, and I write. Now, I'm in that phase of life where things are interesting, so I've actually gotten to the point where I've told myself, you don't have to write a single word today, not one. You can just pack up and go home. And that works for me right now. I mean, before that would be kind of like, no. But I find that not encumbering myself with an expectation is really powerful. I'm knocking out, between 3,000 and 6,000 words a day. And more than anything, I'm doing it because I want to know where this is going. I'm feeling compelled to write the story. It's really interesting to me. I used to be, or maybe I just sort of thought I was, an outliner, but nowadays I'm a pantser. The latest series I started off with the notion, okay, so ghosts, they're real, and then just went into a paranormal romance. But that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm looking at all sorts of other places, and that's my day. I'd like to get it up, and there was a time when I was writing a lot more, and I was actually able to write 2 different novels a day, but I have to start working back into that.
Yeah, I have a quite strict writing routine. When I'm in the writing phase of a book, I usually get up at 10 or 11 in the morning, and then I write for about 3 hours, and then I have another writing phase at night from 10 to like 2 in the morning. So that gives me about 5,000 words per day, and I just keep it like that during the work days. I have off on the weekend, so I have a certain time that I can overlook, and where I'm happy when I have finished that, because, well, it's a different time. And then after that, I can do the other phases of writing that are equally important, I think.
My method was informed mostly by this being a hobby before it was a job, and so I'm horrifically undisciplined. I really would like to be the people. I've bought self-help books, I've listened to podcasts, I've done everything to try to be the guy. I wake up at 5 and I write, but I don't do any of that stuff. My only hard rule is that when I'm in the midst of writing a draft, I have to get 2,000 to 3,000 words a day. And as long as I stick to that rule, a lot of times I find I'm gravitating towards being an evening writer. About 9 o'clock at night, it really starts to hit, and the words really come. But if I sit and try to do it with my kids at school, because that's the quiet time in the house, I just sit there and surf the web and stare at the page, and I don't really get a lot done. So I tend to let it happen naturally as it happens. As long as my goal gets done for the day, then I try not to overthink it too much.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. My writing, 4 years ago, I face planted into a cement floor at Dragon and gave myself a concussion. It took me about 2 years to really get over that and get back on pace. And then I had COVID, and I was hospitalized for 11 days. And since then, I have not been able to really do the kind of focused sessions that I used to do. What I'm producing, I think, is as good as anything I ever produced. But before the concussion, before the COVID, I would write for approximately 6 hours, 7 hours a day on a normal day. As the story began to really move, I would knock out as much as 8,000, 9,000. The most I ever did in one day was 32,000 words. Then I sort of slept for a week, okay. But I was younger then, and I hadn't had the concussion, and I hadn't had the COVID. So it's been, I'm still in the process of trying to find the right adjustment on that. And it's a problem, frankly, right this minute. I mean, I've turned in 4 books, I think, in the last 18 months. 3 of them were collaborations, and sometimes collaborations are harder than solos to work on. So it's not like work's not getting turned in, but to me, it seems like I'm kind of at loose ends while I'm trying to work on it. And then, of course, Sharon's had some health issues here the last few months that have not helped. We're past those. It's good. Before all of this happened, my routine was that I would go out to the office, which is on the other side of the swimming pool, and was established after the twins came home from Cambodia and Michael was born, and we had two 15-months-old and a 14-month and a 1-month-old in the house simultaneously. That was when the office appeared on the other side of the swimming pool with a door. Okay. But I would go out there, and I would go out there in the morning. I'd work for about 4 or 5 hours. I'd break for lunch, spend a little time with the kids. I'd go back out, work for another 3 or 4 hours, come in, read them their nightly story, and then depending on where I was, I'd go back out and work a little bit more. I'm one of those people who works in complete chapters, and I go till I get to the end of whatever the current chapter is, and some days I do more than one, but that's my basic routine.
I'm going to ask one more question before we turn it open to the audience. If you have one piece of advice to give a newcomer to the genre, what would that be? And let's start with Joshua.
This may seem obvious, but read. Read as much as you can. Read as widely as you can. Adam Fuller gave an excellent talk this morning about incorporating mystery tropes into cross-genre, like using mystery in science fiction and fantasy, things like that. I think sometimes writers in our genre tend to get bogged down with the missiles and spaceships and lasers are very, very cool, and we love our technical details. A lot of us come from technical backgrounds, but really make sure that you are building a well-rounded, full story. So when your reader's done, it's not just a collection of really great fight scenes, or tech exposition, that they feel satisfied they read a complete 3-act story or wherever you're going with it. So really read a lot, experience a lot, and break outside of because science fiction is a big umbrella. There's a lot of other little subgenres under it. So make sure you're getting a wide exposure to help kind of round out your writing.
I actually have two. Okay, the first is write what you enjoy reading, because you will write it better than writing something that you don't enjoy reading because you think that's what the market is. And it will help to pull you through the story that you're writing. That's rule number one. And the second commandment is like unto it, okay? Never forget that it's the characters that are why people read the books. Your voice, the way in which you tell the story, the way in which you build the characters is what wins you readership and keeps it. But it's the characters in the story that the readers care about. They may hate them and want to see them get their comeuppance. They may love them and hope like hell if they're in a David Weber book that they don't get dead before the end. Okay, but the characters are what the story is about. The plot is what they have to accomplish. The characters are what the story is about. Never forget that.
Yeah, what helped me a lot when I started writing science fiction was consistency, just doing what I like every day, so not letting one day slip. So I think it's a kind of personality trait also, but if you can manage, I think if you do it regularly, it's like with everything you do, if you do it regularly, you definitely get better at it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the weird one. Allow yourself to be bad. I'm going to repeat that. Allow yourself to be bad. I've seen so many writers who are sitting out there going, but I still have to work out the right words for the first sentence. No, you can edit stuff when it's done, but there's no way in hell you can edit a blank page. Allow yourself to be bad. Say, okay, it's not perfect, but I got it on the paper. I know I can come back and read it later and clean it up.
And mine's real quick. So many people come up to me and saying, I'm thinking of writing a book. I'm thinking of writing a book. And 3 years later, they see me at a con, I'm thinking of writing the book. Turn on the computer, hit the keyboard. That's my advice. Okay, we've got 15 seconds over 10 minutes to ask some questions. If you have a question, can you please move to one of these microphones, and we'll see if we can answer them. or lie.
This is maybe more for Todd than the rest of you because it's kind of both science fiction and fantasy. I've heard a couple of people in different sessions today describe science fiction as limiting. Is that what you think about it? Do you think that science fiction kind of puts so many constraints on you that you have to stay within those constraints? Or do you feel that science fiction is as open as fantasy in terms of writing a story?
Kevin Anderson and I agree on the notion that actually science fiction is a subset of fantasy. The old definition of science fiction is everything we have today plus one impossible thing. Nowadays, it's kind of moved up a little bit. But no, I don't find science fiction, I find it to be a really interesting place to operate. You know, in a fantasy world, you can be riding the dinosaur too much. You can be the hero of the entire story, and the minute you need something to go your way, you can, you know, cast the everything goes my way spell. You can overdo it. I mean, one of the fun things about fantasy is inventing a good set of rules and working with them. But science fiction, it's all over the place. And so, no, I don't agree with that.
If I may, any genre is as limiting as you allow it to be. Okay? Now, having said that, in any story, whether it's science fiction or anything else, it's what your characters can't do, even more than what they can do, that creates the plot, creates the energy. Okay? And so the more limits, in some ways, the better in that regard, depending on what you're writing. But a storyteller tells stories because if we don't, our fangs grow through our brains and kill us. Okay? That's why we write. All right? Seriously, when you get down to the bottom line. And if you limit yourself, it's limiting. If you don't, it's not.
So earlier, y'all described your typical day when drafting your work. When you start revising, what does that daily schedule sort of look like?
It changes over time. You know, the thing about writing is the more you do it, the better you get at it. You work the muscles. I used to have a rule, and it's really the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy rule, which is you take your finished product and you bury it in soft peat for a number of months before you look at it again. Because it's very, very hard to go back and look at your story and understand that really your baby doesn't need two heads to be perfect, nor the four arms or whatever else, and these things need to go out. Nowadays, I can turn around much more quickly and go back through it, and I'm looking for typos and plot inconsistencies, so it becomes easier with time. That's what I would say.
Usually my revision process, I finish the draft, I put it aside for 2 weeks and try to get it out of my head. And then revision is I read the thing from top to bottom in one sitting. I want to consume this in one setting to see is this a cohesive thought. And letting it sit to 2 weeks lets me I don't have the bias of having just written it. I can see things fresh and see that, no, the reader's this isn't gonna make sense to them, or I don't like this, or this didn't work at all. So I try to do the revision as quickly and accurate as I can because I don't want to forget what I read at the beginning. I don't want those feelings to kind of erode before I get to the end. So that's my process.
I revise daily. Every day when I begin work, I revise everything I did for the last 3 days. That's my running start on the day's work. So everything I've done has been revised, however many days I worked on it for 3 days back. Then when I'm done, I put the keyboard down, I go away, spend at least 4 or 5 days doing something else, and then I come back. But I'm in the revision process the entire time I'm in the writing process as well.
It's very interesting. I've been a fan of almost all of you for at least the last 70 years. and also, this is like my sixth
70 yet.
20 books. And the interesting thing to me was that this panel and your discussion and your questions and answers could have applied to almost any genre because you talked about process, you talked about inspiration and things like that. And so I want to ask a science fiction question, and that is, what do you consider the unique tropes of science fiction that no other genre has?
I don't think that's. I mean, you get stories like "Lest Darkness Fall" by L. Sprague de Camp, right? Which is a time travel story. You get the Harry Turtledove colonization series, another sort of alternate history thing. You get Guns of the South, also by Harry Turtledove. You get Time Storm by Gordy R. Dixon, where we have ripples of space-time coming in, dividing up the Earth. There are no tropes. It's let's go take what we know and add stuff to it. And if you add too much stuff to it, then you're sort of moving into the realm of fantasy.
I'd say there are tropes, but not specifically tropes to science fiction. Okay, there are tropes to storytelling. There are techniques, there are devices, there are processes that we use, and they can be applied to any genre. My own feeling is that a good writer can write any genre. We write the ones that appeal to us the most. But we would be using an awful lot of the same tropes, whether it was science fiction or military fiction or military science fiction or historical fiction or whatever.
Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one, possibly two, but probably one question.
Hi. How many unique words in your books, as in new words you've invented, are too many, and how many is enough that it doesn't scare away people trying to read it?
That's a good question. Nowadays, with things like Grammarly and auto spell checking and everything, adding new words into wherever you want to go is generally going to get you nagged by the homogeneity. Okay, can't do the word. The homogeneity league. You don't want to lose the reader. So, Katoff, chuhled, clunkly down the ramp is, you've lost the reader. Why did I need that? Especially seeing as Katoff probably feels that he's much more, don't do it. Keep it in mind that it has to be read by a human. Add the special stuff. Add the spice.
One thing I've learned, I write with an eye to audio these days because the market is becoming huge, and I'm friends with my narrators, and I want them to still like me at the end of the day. So I try to keep the words try to pare down a made-up word to when I really need to use it, and try to make it phonetically pleasing, because this guy's got to say this a couple dozen times through a narration.
Okay, let's give one more chance, one more, and we'll get one of us to answer it before we run out of time.
Good grief, I'm short. Okay, this is a quick question for David from Carrie, watching on the Book of Face. When you said you did 32,000 words in one day, was that handwriting, was that typing, or dictating?
That was keyboard. Okay, now with voice activated, I could have done it with a lot less wear and tear. I worked for 11 plus hours straight with a break only for the occasional cup of coffee. By the way, anybody who reads Honor Harrington and sees how she hates coffee should recognize the work of a recovering addict who has since fallen back off the wagon, But yeah, that was keyboard. That was before I broke my wrist.
Okay, we've got 1 minute and 20 seconds, so really quick, if everybody has a final comment or where people can find you or whatever. Todd?
If you're not pro yet, consider submitting to Writers of the Future. They take short stories. It's free online once a quarter. Great way to do stuff. And also write what you love.
Yeah, I can only underwrite write what you love. That's really the most important thing here. Yeah.
Once this conference is over, like this is my fourth or fifth time being here, take the energy you're getting from this and really try to apply it. Sit down and do it. Don't let it sit for a week or two and then try to get back at it. Really take what you're hearing from everybody and sit and try to put it on the page.
Remember my favorite John Paul Jones quote. It seems to be a law inflexible unto itself that he who will not risk cannot win. If you do not take the chance of failing as a writer, you will never succeed as a writer. So if this is what you think you want to do it. And take the risk that you'll find out that no, you were wrong. Because if you don't, you'll never find out you were right.
And right there, 000. Time's up. I appreciate everybody for coming here. Hopefully it was good. And have a great rest of the 20 books.